And yes, it is December, and Coalition Purple is still on the air.
Yeah, crazy. It's hard to believe that it's already December. This year's
Ugh,
almost done. It's crazy.
I know, and it's kind of it's one of those cliche things. I think as you get older, it even becomes more cliche because it's like every month is like, how can it be whatever March? Whatever the month's coming up. But I think it's sort of indicative of all the craziness going on out there in the political world that we tend to focus on. Um, on one hand, it seems like around the world right now, all the things, crazy things going on in South Korea and
Oh yeah.
France, and I mean, there's just a lot of strangeness everywhere. It seems like right now. So we don't have a monopoly on that here in the States, which in some ways is kind of comforting, but in other ways, I think back through history, and it's in times of when there's a lot of upheaval around the world, is when a lot of bad stuff can happen. So,
Well, I mean, I think, if you start to look worldwide, a lot of bad stuff is happening. One of the things that caught my attention was the I guess we're still calling them tweets or X's, and I guess Trump calls them truths. Don't know. Not really paying that close
yeah,
attention to
well,
what we
so
sort of call
Trump's
these things.
platform is Truth
Truth.
Social, and
Yeah.
then Musk is now called X, whatever.
But he sent out a something. It's saying that, all the hostage takers in the Middle East are on notice that as soon as he comes into office, they have better have released those hostages, or there's going to be hell to pay. What exactly that means, I don't know. But the thing that caught my attention about it was, and I hadn't really thought about it, in these terms so much, is that a lot of those hostages are Americans.
There's
I
several,
mean,
quite a few, yeah,
they were taken hostage while in Israel,
yeah,
but they're Americans, so the government has a responsibility to the citizenship of this country that, if you get taken hostage by somebody, theoretically they're supposed to act on your behalf. And the crazy thing about it is that that's what brought Ronald Reagan into office, was
right,
when the Iranians had taken hostages
yeah,
and Jimmy Carter had been feckless about dealing with it. One of the big issues that Reagan ran on was, I'm going to bring the hostages home. I'm going to end the Iran hostage crisis. And I don't know where I saw an article talking about it, or maybe I heard it on the radio or something. But as soon as they mentioned the fact that there were, in fact, Americans being held hostage, and I hadn't really thought about it that way, it was like a light bulb went off like, wow, that is kind of a weird parallel back to some of
right,
the darker times in the 70s. It's like, geez, it's that. So as far as craziness in the world goes,
yeah,
yeah, it's crazy.
right. And I guess it's interesting that he's putting up all the tough talk, but it's like, hey, Israel's been pretty tough on them already,
Oh
and
yeah,
it's like, well, I'm not too sure what you're going to do outside of, I mean, because there's nothing left of the Gaza Strip,
that
basically.
cause is gone.
It's just obliterated. They're somewhere down in a tunnel somewhere, right?
Mhm.
And I don't know what you're going to do that's any different at this point. But so, you know, it's a lot of interesting rhetoric. But again, like we said last week, these next couple months are, I guess the good news is from a domestic standpoint, not a whole lot's going to get done, which is probably a good thing.
Yeah, I'm always thankful for that. Yeah, as they say, it's kind of like weird tangent time, because a lot of what a lot of people are doing around this time is you get together with family and you talk to people about things and you haven't seen them for a long time. And my mother lives here in Southern California, and my uncle who lives in Washington State, um, don't get together very often, but they do for Thanksgiving. And so those are frankly, my last two living relatives.
Right.
And so we had a lot of time to talk over the holidays, which is, was a pleasure and something I don't necessarily get to do all the time. But
Right.
interestingly, one of the conversations we had, because my mother was born in Southern California. She's 82 years old now. and lived in California her whole life. And my uncle, obviously her brother, had he's younger than she is, but born in California, lived here most of his life until moving up to Washington in recent years. And we just spent a lot of time talking about how different California is and how things have changed. And one of the conversations we had was how, and I even remember this from when I was younger, how much time we used to spend in Tijuana. And it's
Right.
like this weird conversation.
Yeah.
But, back in the 40s and 50s, when my uncle and my mother were around, I mean, going back and forth to Tijuana was just something Southern Californians did.
Yeah.
You go down there, you buy things, you'd hang out, you'd do whatever.
Yep.
And one of the things that I was saying is like I did volunteer work in Tijuana. I helped partially rebuild an orphanage, put a roof on it. So I spent lots of time in Tijuana going back and forth. And people from Tijuana, the Mexicans, used to come across into California, and there was all kinds of like work permit programs and seasonal work programs, and it was like Mexico was cool. You go
Oh,
down there, it was a
absolutely.
different place, a different country, but you'd go there and it was fine. And people would come across, and so many of the people that work in Southern California, especially in the San Diego area, that go back and forth and commute and do all these things. And it's like it was a really, conversation about how California used to have this really good sort of relationship with the border. And
Right.
now everything about the border is so contentious,
Yep.
and it's kind of crazy. And it was just, I don't know, it was just one of those conversations that you have talking to somebody from a different generation, in a completely peaceful way, no contention, no politics, but just about, I remember, we used to go down there and we knew this guy and he helped us build a gate for your grandfather's house, and we bought all this tile that we used and we brought it back and it was so beautiful and we used to have it. And we used to go down there all the time, and the food was good, and we had good relationships with people down there that we knew, and blah blah blah. And it's just like, God, it just
Yeah.
isn't that way anymore so much. It
No,
just doesn't seem to
not at
be.
all.
Maybe I'm missing something.
No, I've had that same feeling. I mean, I haven't been in Mexico now for probably thinking 25, 30 years. I haven't been down there.
Yeah,
And but that's what I remember, back when I was much younger, being able to, it was just another day, eat on go on both sides. It's like, so it really has changed, and it's sad in my
yeah, I
mind.
think so
It's really
too.
sad. We've lost a lot of that cultural connection and as well. And again, well, and it goes back, back to politics, right? It's like, I think the border situation is one of those things that should be relatively easy to solve. I
Yeah,
mean, they need us and we need them,
yeah,
and that, I mean, just from a pure economic situation, we need each other. And, but more importantly, even beyond that, just there's so much heritage
yeah,
that's gone back and forth over the centuries, literally. Um, it's just sad to lose that connection, because it really did feel like, yeah, they were different countries, but they were all we were all respectful of each other, generally speaking. So, yeah, no, it's crazy.
yeah,
And well, and all the more reason why, trying to bring it back around to third party here, that's why we need more sane individuals, e- dealing with some of this stuff. And I really been thinking a lot about what you said last week about, you know, California is just a great place to start, to try and, if you can kind of make it happen, in a realistic way here in California, it's going to be followed by lots of other states, because
yeah,
it's hard to get anything done in California. And I've been reminded of that so much in this past week or so, because there's been so much more reporting on all the new laws that are coming into effect and all that kind of stuff. And just all the, you know, areas that the most telling one for me is the talk of the Air Quality Resources Board. And um, they're really pushing hard, and Newsom is apparently signed off on this, to really force the issue of, lower impact fuel to, improve and move us towards more of electrical cars and all that. But
yeah,
the result of that is depending on who you listen to, it potentially will raise gas taxes by another 50 to 80 cents.
Yeah.
And it's like, I want clean air for sure, no question about it. But we got to figure out another way of getting there because it impacts everybody, but it really impacts working people more than anything. People that have to drive to work every day, that's it's just ridiculous. And especially concerning just the fact that we already have some of the highest gas prices in the country as it is.
Yeah. My part of my problem with that in just the sort of like the way that it's presented, I look at the huge deficit that the California government is going to be running, and the California government is well aware of this deficit. And my feeling about this thing has always been that the reason they're doing it is because they need to find a way to pay themselves some money. And they're just simply lying to us about the environmental impact of it. And I mean, maybe that's incredibly cynical of me, but it's just a money grab. And that's all that it is. In the long run, all it's going to do is drive up gas prices. It's going to do nothing at all for the actual environment. And Californians are going to be poorer, cost of living is going to go up. And again, it's like these taxes go through, and it doesn't really have anything to do with the voters because this is a bill going through Congress.
Right.
It wasn't a proposition or anything.
Right.
So we have no control over it. But it's like it's enabling. It's like the government has stupid policies that gets it vastly into debt, and then instead of having to reap the consequences of those terrible decisions, it simply steals some more money from commuters. And it's going to be bad for the economy.
Everything.
It's going to make it like it's already hard to get things delivered into California because, like, if you're an independent trucker
Yeah.
and you want to deliver a load of something from somewhere into California, well, to get through California, you're going to have to buy gas somewhere. And that means the cost to you, you're an independent businessman because your business is driving a truck and delivering things, means that you have to charge a vastly greater amount for the delivery in California because of the amount of gasoline you're going to need
Yep.
to um, get the delivery made. And then there are some people that will argue, okay, well, then there should be nothing but electric trucks. What electric trucks? Where are you going to charge the electric trucks? How much electricity and time is it going to take to charge the electric trucks? And it's like, it's nice to say that we should have electric trucks, but we just don't.
Right.
And so, you put all these burdens on people and you destroy
Right.
quality of life for many people who just are trying to get around and, do a job, make a living, get by. All and you try and disguise it all under the veil of, oh, we have to stop global warming. Uh, for me, it's like people have to wake up that the whole global warming thing, I can look at a temperature graph. The globe is getting warming. But the political version of everybody talking about everything global warming is a scam.
Yeah. Well, on this particular one with California, this thing that Newsom just signed off on, the irony of it, to your point, is the oil companies are actually in favor of this, and the environmentalists are against it.
Yeah.
So what does that tell you? It's
Yeah,
like-
it tells you everything you
because
need to know is what it tells you.
it's basically another big loophole because the way it works now, um, large companies can pay into the carbon,
Yeah,
whatever,
carbon offset program. That's another total
carbon
scam.
offset thing. So for them, it's like, okay, whatever. And so they're not really incented to actually create cleaner fuels really through
Right.
this. There's really no incentive that if all this money was truly being dedicated towards building more power, places where people could power up their electric cars and all this kind of stuff, maybe, but none of that's happening.
Yeah.
And it's just like, this is where, California is really used to be a leader in so many of these kinds of things, and now is just like you said. I think it is pretty much a money grab in many ways. It's
Well,
kind of seeing more like that all the time.
I'm glad you brought up the carbon offset thing because it's kind of tangential to things, but it's worth talking about just for a second.
Yeah,
Basically, the idea behind the carbon offset thing is that if you're a company that produces a lot of pollution, carbon, you can pay the government to allow you to continue to produce just as much pollution as you want. So
Yep.
wait, so it's like you got to take a deep breath and step back on that one and say, wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute. So you have a big company that can pay government a lot of money so it can
Well, and
produce
it's
as
a
much pollution
fraction
as
to
you
them
want.
anyways. It's not that big of a deal.
Right, and then it raises prices on things for whatever it's producing to pay itself back from that, which raises
Yep.
cost of living on everybody.
Yep.
And it's like, but isn't the government supposed to be concerned about the environment? If people can just legally buy the government
Buy their
off,
way out.
then they're not concerned about the environment. They're
Yeah.
producing as much or more pollution than they ever have, and all they have to do is buy off the politicians. Again, it's
Yeah.
just a money grab. It's not that they actually care about the environment or they want to see things get better. And it's like, again, it's kind of one of these things where, when you're talking about a third party and how it could be created and how it's people have got to stop believing in these
Yes.
scams that the government throw out there to try and convince everybody that, oh no, no, we're the good guys and we're fighting for the environment and we're doing this for you and it's all in your best interest and it's all for your best benefit. And then years and years go down the road and you see nothing get better. At some point, people have just got to say, look, we just don't believe you anymore. That's it. You're gone. We're done.
Yeah. Well, and no, it's really true because they put a nice label on it that sounds really good,
Yeah.
and that's about how far most people go. They read some little label or headline and said, "Well, that sounds good. It should be in favor of that." They don't really dig even. You don't even have to go that far down to really kind of understand what some of these things are, right?
Yeah.
And going back to the third party piece of it, the other interesting thing that caught my eye. And of course, I'm going to forget the district name, but they just finally settled the last election for the House of Representatives. It was here in
Oh, that took
California,
forever.
and the Democrat won, but he only won by like 450 votes.
Yeah.
And so, it really got me thinking that, these are the kind of districts that a third party can really have an impact on. Even here in District 49, the 11 one, he only won by 16,000 votes, which sounds like a lot, but out
Yeah.
of almost 400,000 votes, it's really not that much.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's where, while some people would say, hey, it's a spoiler, a third party becomes a spoiler. I look at it as the superpower, right? It's like, hey, if you can get these people together, all the independents together on both sides of the aisle, and say, hey, Mike Levin or his opponent will vote for you if you do X, Y, and Z. That's a lot of power.
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
is, and it's not being a spoiler. It's about trying to force change into all these things that we're always talking about, whether it's campaign finance reform or whatever, just doing smart things, right? And
Yeah.
so I hope we can figure out how to communicate it better. That this is not about being a spoiler. It's about using that power, basically power against them. It's kind of like the jujitsu thing, use their
Yeah.
opponent's power against them.
Yeah. Yeah. I was just going to say that one of the things that, I found sort of interesting about the last campaign and RFK's role in it, because I was marginally
Right.
an RFK supporter, is that, if you really thought strategically, you could really leverage a lot of power as a third party, even if you weren't ever really going to win an election. Let's
Right.
say you take one of these districts that we've just been talking about here in California that we're so close, and you have a third party candidate that's doing moderately well. Well, the third party, which has certain interests and ideas, if it were getting, enough votes that it could toss the election one way or the other, you could use that to try and get concessions from the other party as like a negotiating tool. It's like, look,
Exactly.
I understand that I'm not going to win this race. I'm only going to get 15% of the vote. But that 15% of the vote wins it for whoever comes to me first and says, we're actually going to do something about cost of living in California and has some
Right.
ideas and proposals about that. I will then drop out and I will support you very loudly, and that will win you the race. And the thing is, if you have a party and you have people thinking about how to actually do things in a practical way, things like that actually can matter. And there's a little bit of like dirty politics, distaste when you start talking about things like that.
Yep.
But anything goes in
Reality.
politics, right? So I mean, at some point you have to be willing to say we're going to play the game as the game is being played. The rules are what they are. We can do what we can do.
Right.
And but I think, if you have an organized party, they can look at races like that and say, look, we're gonna run and we're gonna try and win. But we're not going to be a spoiler because if it gets to the point where we're not going to win, then we'll endorse.
Yeah.
You can have a two-tiered concept of how you want to run a race. And sometimes you'll win, sometimes you'll endorse. But that way you're building momentum, you're building the party, and you're sticking to a consistent message that's conscientious and ethical. And you're not always having to compromise everything that you do or you say. It's like I'm going to fight to win this race because that's where I can make the most effect. But if I can't have that effect, I'm going to still try and have a good effect by getting people to come on board with the things that we value the most. And as I say, if you ran elections like that, I think a third party could be unbelievably influential, even without winning very many elections.
No, absolutely. No, that is the superpower, at least for now, until they get established and one of these two major parties goes away or gets so diminished that they don't matter anymore.
Yeah.
But that's not going to happen anytime soon,
No, I
obviously.
don't think so.
And in the meantime, use that leverage that we do have, and you know, and there's a lot of races like that,
Oh,
and
tons everywhere.
it's one of those easy things that, particularly on the House races, and when you're looking at federal, they have to come up for reelection every 2 years. So it's like, okay, we'll support you, but in the next 2 years, if you don't do something serious, we're gonna vote for the other person.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, I was going to throw out there too. Another thing that gets people all up, gets their dander all up, is gerrymandering districts. So the idea is in a lot of these states, especially a state like California, which is blue as blue can be, or maybe take a red state like the Dakotas. Although the Dakotas have
Right.
such a small population, there's not enough districts to gerrymander. But putting that aside for a minute,
Yeah, but Texas or Alabama, whatever.
Texas, Alabama, yeah, I'd pick one. And the idea is, though, is that you gerrymander these districts so that they're safe, but the reality is they're not safe by a lot, right? It
No.
takes some of them are safe as safe can be, but others, you've just managed to pull enough people together in one spot that you've pretty much got it for as long as you want it. You inject a third party into those places, and all those gerrymandered districts just explode all over the
Yeah.
place. And suddenly they're all competitive for all sorts of different reasons, whether they be potentially shifting to red, to shifting to blue, or shifting to purple.
Right.
And if you can do things like that, the impact is vast. I mean, what percentage of the congressional seats, in the U.S. House, and then also the way the districts are done for even for local elections for
Right.
California House and Senate, what percentage of those districts are gerrymandered in a way that they're sort of cobbled together so that they'll be safe? Half at least
Oh yeah.
probably. And
Yeah.
so it's like if you can throw all those districts into turmoil all of a sudden, well, now the people start to have a voice.
Exactly.
Their votes actually start to matter. Yeah, sure, you're in a gerrymandered district, but you don't have to vote for option A or B. Now you can vote for option C too. And if enough people from option A decide that they're going to vote for option C, well, option A is in an awful lot of trouble. And
Yeah.
they're going to have to start actually listening to the people in those districts and seeing what it is they actually want in a politician, as far as actual representation. So, I mean, I think
Right.
it'd be great.
No, it's a really good point. And that whole gerrymandering issue, I think, should be fairly high on the list for a third party
Oh,
in terms of
absolutely.
finding solutions to this, because and I think we've talked about this before, in this world of GPS science,
Hmm.
it should be real easy to create districts that are not gerrymandered, that you're just follow the same algorithm until you get to the point, and then you move on to the next one,
Hmm.
and just take it out of the hands, to the most part, of humans,
Yeah,
because it's gotten. I mean, some states. I mean, all and both parties do it. Both parties
yeah,
do it,
for
but
sure.
some states. I mean, just some of these districts that are created are just ridiculous.
Oh, I know they're
I mean, they're
crazy.
going by literally street by street to make sure. Oh yeah, we know a bunch of, name whatever the demographic lives there. So we want to cut them out, but we want to add this group over here. And it's ridiculous. I mean, literally, there's like one street that connects a district, between two big other areas just so they can get around it. And that's just wrong. I mean, that has never been the intention of the whole representative government that we had.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, as I say, I think fair districting, like you say, is another one of those issues for a third party that,
Yeah.
it just isn't talked about enough because, like, as you say, again, it's back to the idea of the uniparty.
Yep.
The Democrats and Republicans do disagree on some things, but in something like when it comes to gerrymandering, they're in complete and total agreement. Wherever they have power, they gerrymander as much as they can and as often as they can. So if you had a fair broker, a third party come out and say, hey, look, we support fair districting, I mean, everything's an uphill climb.
Right.
So you can just add that to the list of things that, would be difficult to get past, but nonetheless, people should be talking about and are a very valid thing to base a political decision on.
Right. Well, and again, the the whole hypocrisy of all that's going on right now is making people crazy. I
Oh
think,
yeah.
and I think that's part of this dissatisfaction and all just this crazy behavior that's going on. Um, because I think people are just seeing whatever bubble they're living within, they're seeing hypocrisy on one side and they think it's only happening on that one side. No, it's happening on both sides. I mean, the whole Joe Biden pardon of his son was, one of the latest examples of it. And I mean, I kind of get where he's coming from. I mean, it's kind of hard to say I'm not going to do it because, Trump did the same thing when he was in, you know, power. He pardoned a whole bunch of people, and he's planning on pardoning a bunch more.
Yeah.
So I kind of get it, but again, two rights don't make a wrong either.
I have to
So,
say, since we brought up the presidential pardon, there's one part of it that it's like the presidential pardons. For years, for as long as I've been alive, people like roll their eyes. Oh my God, he's pardoning this guy and that guy. Oh geez, God, not that again. But this particular one, I find a little bit galling because it pardons him for anything he may have done for the past 10 years. I
yep,
mean, that's kind of disturbing. I mean,
yep,
that to me, in a way, that's an admission that all the things that people have been accusing you of doing are actually true.
right,
You've been abusing the law for 10 years. You've been laundering money and enriching yourself for 10 years using, improper foreign influence for
yep,
10 years. And you just wrote yourself a get out of jail free card. And I think the most interesting thing of all of how this happens is what are people going to say when Joe Biden eventually pardons his brother, himself, his wife, his other children, um, their spouses. He starts pardoning anybody that might be able to rat out what they've been doing for the past 10 years, and they all get pardons that go back for 10, 15 years.
yep,
I mean, if people don't take a step back when that happens and say, okay, this is seriously corrupt.
yep,
I mean, again, it's all about and because this is all about the third party mindset. If the Democrats are that corrupt, and then they fought so hard for Joe Biden, and you have to know that a lot of them know about all this corrupt BS that's been going on. If they fought tooth and nail for him, and they're that corrupt and they're that dishonest, you just cannot vote for them anymore.
yeah. Well, and the flip side of it too is with Trump dealing with all the crazy appointments that he's making, and some of these people that are just, have never had any experience in some of these roles
Mm.
whatsoever, and all that kind of stuff, and already are threatening to do all kinds of things. It That's where I see it as this big stew of just a little bit, the ingredients of hypocrisy, cynicism, all these things that are happening in this political world right now that is just making people crazy.
Yeah,
And somehow that all has to be tampered down. And the only only come to the conclusion the only way to get there is somehow get people more engaged outside of those two parties,
yeah,
because it's going to continue. As crazy as the Biden pardon is, um, we're going to see more of it, not
Oh,
only from him,
absolutely.
not only from
Absolutely.
him, but from when Trump gets into office. He's already saying he's going to pardon all the January 6 people and all this kind of stuff. So we're going to do it, but it's all, none of it's doing the country any good. It's not
Yeah.
solving any of our problems.
Yeah. Well, one of the
Yet
other things that,
that's where everybody's spending their time and discuss, including us right at the moment, instead of discussing how are we going to solve these things like the border issues and stuff like that.
yeah.
How do you bring down the cost of living really in a realistic way?
Yeah.
None of those things are really being discussed right now. It's all about all these crazy things going on.
Yeah. Well, one thing that I would just add, because it looks like we're actually getting close to
Yeah.
where we like to stop, is one of the things that's happened over the years was the watering down of the impeachment power within Congress. It's become more of a political tool and less of
Totally.
a serious instrument of enforcing the law.
Right.
And I think that that was really harmful.
Yeah.
I'm not going to go into it too much at the moment, but part of the answer to presidents doing crazy things or putting crazy people into positions that they have no business being in, or when those crazy people do things that they shouldn't be doing or breaking the laws, is that you're supposed to have an independent judiciary and you're supposed to have the power of impeachment. And the independent judiciary, I think, is definitely in question. I mean, that's one of the big things that, you
Yeah.
know, Biden, in fact, pointed out that his own Justice Department had corruptly, persecuted his son. So, I mean, so now we've gone full circle on that one. So the independent judiciary has been harmed over the years, but the impeachment power has been watered down to essentially meaninglessness. And so it's like those are the things that are supposed to keep a president from abusing their executive authority. And we've kind of just flushed him down the toilet without
Right.
even a second thought. And I think that is also a terrible situation.
Yeah. No, absolutely. No, crazy, crazy times. But all the more reason, I hope people start getting more engaged, start thinking beyond the two boxes of Democrats and
That's what has to
Republicans.
happen. You've got to start thinking
That's the
beyond the two
only way
boxes.
it's going to happen. You're not going to reform either of these parties from the inside.
No, I just don't think
Not
so.
not until they get kind of burned down to a level where you can maybe start to build them up. But
Yeah,
that's going to be a long time.
there's just no motivation within the party to reform. As far as they're concerned, everything's going great. They
Right.
have the power. They're getting reelected. They're getting the money. They're getting the perks, the this, the that.
Yeah.
Why would they reform? They don't want to.
Yeah.
So there's going to have to be a movement to say, look, we have to take away the power from the duopoly, and we have to have actual options that give people an ability to vote for something that they actually want to see happen. And right now, we just don't have that.
Yeah. All right. We'll leave it there and got to start working on that platform.
I know. One of
Uh,
these days we'll get it all organized and get it done
yeah.
right.
Once we get all rested up during the holidays, we'll be ready to go.
Yeah.
That's my theory.
It's always next week. Next week it's gonna be great.
Right, right, right. All right, man. We'll talk to you in a bit.
All right. Thanks so much. See you soon.
Bye.